Okay, so it's that whole thing of not getting caught up in thought, seeing
Hmm.
through thought. That, to use the way you described it, that thought is very thin,
Yeah.
and if we can see that, that it, it, it opens up the possibility for us to not get caught up in it and moved to do things that we might not want to do or are not in our best interest or cause problems for others. Hang on a second. And there are two sides to this, and one of them I think I understand what's going on. The first one is that I can see that, but I will still get caught up in it. Um, like the whole thing with caffeine. Um, uh, you know, there are a lot of reasons not to, and there really aren't any reasons to.
Hmm.
And so trying to use that as a way of um, not engaging in that behavior to see through the thought. Um, it's not really been something that there's been any great success with, and I think the reason maybe why is that there is some kind of deeper underlying feeling, like I think you mentioned, um, you know, doing something nice for yourself, or I can't remember the other reasons that you gave, but there's some sort of, I guess, what we might call it a psychological underpinning
Hmm.
or some kind of emotional need.
Yep.
So I think that might explain what's going on there. But the other one is, or the other aspect of this is that um, for so long, I mean, for decades, probably for my entire life, the way of dealing with these things, whether it's having a cup of coffee or staying up too late or, eating stuff that really don't need to be eating, whatever.
Hmm.
And I know that when I was drinking, that I fought mightily with this in this very sort of way of the thought comes up and it's resisting the thought
Yeah.
essentially. Like, no, I don't want to do that, trying to counter the thought, and it's seldom effective.
Yeah.
And so in trying to apply that, or not trying to apply that, and when trying to see the thinness of thought when there's the thought to do something, um, that that's the first thing that happens. Like, okay, let's get some coffee, and like, no, 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 we don't want to do that. And I'm like, hold on a minute, we're going about this the wrong way. And then trying to get back to that, seeing through the thought, and I don't know what's at work there, because it seems like that initial thought of um, this is bad or whatever the case might be, um, and trying to resist the thought, trying to fight it, trying to mount a defense against it, it seems to somehow, I can't get from there. I can't get back to the seeing through the thought.
So it's so interesting because we're also not making the distinction, right? So I have a thought that I want to go get a cup of coffee, but then I have a thought that says, no, 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 wait, stop. Both of those are thoughts. There's a belief in thought that is inherently underlying all of it.
Yeah.
There's the first thought comes up and it feels very personal that I want a cup of coffee.
Uh-huh.
Then there's this other layer that comes on. No, 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 no. Second thought. No, no, no. We shouldn't have that. Now there's an identification with that thought at the expense of the first thought,
Right.
right? Now the first thought is an intruder that shouldn't be here. Can't listen to that one. That's the devil on my shoulder. Can't talk, can't listen to that one. Now I've got the good voice that's saying, "Oh, okay, no, 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 shouldn't be doing that one. Let's go meditate or, have something, have a tea or something and self instead, something else instead." But both of those are investigatable because both of those are thoughts that are being believed in the moment. And it might actually be easier to start with the angel thought than the devil thought.
Hmm. Okay.
Because if you have the idea that, you know, okay, the real me is saying, no, no, I don't need the coffee. I shouldn't have it. I know I'm going to feel like crap if I do have it, you know, or it's not going to give me any benefit. And hold on. Look at that thought. First of all, how is it appearing? So is it coming up as an image? Is it self-talk? Is it, you know, what are the bodily components to that? Break it down like we've been doing. So for you, when you have a thought about, no, no, shouldn't have the coffee, let's do something else. Is that self-talk? Is there an image involved? What is your experience of it?
I can't say yes or no to the images. I haven't been paying close attention to that because I've been so um, caught up in or putting so much attention on the thought. That seems to be the primary thing that's happening is the thought.
But by thought, you mean auditory thought?
You mean like the voice heard in the head?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's primarily just a voice in the head saying, no, 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 hold on now.
right.
So when that comes up, what is happening in the body that makes that thought feel like you, like tangible, like real? Like that's the one that now needs to be listened to and not the first devil voice.
See the previous conversation. That's exactly it.
Yep. So so you know there's just sensation there that has nothing to do with the actuality of the sound or the sights that you're seeing.
Yeah, it just comes up in tandem for whatever reason.
It does. It doesn't mean anything. So the
Hmm.
first thing that you want to do is to take a thought that you really like. It's you know it feels like it's coming from your best place,
Okay.
right? Do you know what I mean? Like that like the because it's easy for us to look at thoughts that we deem as being bad or problematic or against my best interest or something like that, and we can investigate those and we should investigate those. But I think there's actually more identification with the ones that are like, this is my better self. This is, you know, I feel like I
Hmm.
should get on the mat and do some meditation, but you know, oh no, I really just feel like relaxing and watching some TV right now. Oh, but I should get on there, or else I'm gonna. Okay, so take the I should voice. You know, don't just go after the low hanging fruit of the Netflix voice, but go into the ones that, because that's the one that really feels like you're getting something from that voice. Like that is the personal voice. That's the real better me who I want to be more like. It's like I
Uh,
want more of that than this one. So there's a bias already. There's a belief in that thought just as much as in the other one. So and we don't have the negative associations with that voice as we do the one
uh,
that is telling us to do the other stuff.
I see. Okay.
Because the other one, you know, you're gonna go into, if you go into the like I need caffeine voice or thought, then you're going to have all the associations of like, but I know I don't need it and I should, you know, like I've gotten worked through this with other substances in the past. This is just one more thing. And you're going to have all these levels of association and rejection that you're going to have to work through and see through to see the, the insubstantiality of that thought. Whereas if
Okay.
you go to the one that just seems really clean and pure and like for your best interest, if you really want to see how insubstantial that thought is, there are a lot less barriers to getting there.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
So take that thought that like I shouldn't have caffeine today, or I don't need the coffee. You know, I
Mhm.
should just be aware of, you know, I should just inquire instead of going and getting a cup of coffee.
Right.
Feel, well, hear that sound in the head and how dense and solid is that sound?
Hmm.
Is it tangible? Is it something that like takes up space in the mind?
No.
How is it, how does the sound get translated into that's just like this thin little passing vibration of the of you know inner sound waves, however that. is understood into something which is believable, has like some feeling of connection to an actual world.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Yeah, I understand that. Let me see if I can rephrase that. So you have like if the inner voice right now was speaking Chinese and you don't speak Chinese,
Right.
there would be no particular association to that voice, right? Or
I
to that
see.
thing.
Yeah.
There's something that is taking pure wall, just sound in the inner space. And it's translating that into a meaning of something. And then there's a second layer. So we have like the same thing that we do with like you're doing right now without thinking about it, right? This
Mm,
weird random fluttering of sound is becoming intelligible, semi-intelligible um, words and concepts in your mind, right? You don't have to willfully do something to make sense of the English language because you've learned how to speak it and the brain can translate these or similar sounds into some sort of meaning. So that is happening in the mind. It's generating this kind of weird speech pattern that's being understood as something else. But there's this other layer too, where we go from now, like if I was talking about um, kangaroos on Jupiter hopping around at a birthday party, that doesn't like connect to anything in the real world right now around you. There doesn't feel like there's any real connection to anything that we're talking about. You can have images, it can spark like images, and it's probably there's a little giggle because it's like, well, it's a funny little thing that pops up, but it doesn't feel like it's connected to something tangible in the world around you at this moment.
right. It's pretty abstract.
Exactly. But the thought that, I can or I shouldn't get a cup of coffee right now seems much more potent and tangible because there is probably coffee either in the house or in the drivable vicinity.
Yeah.
The idea that I can refrain from that. And so it's suddenly there's this other layer of meaning on it that you know what the sound means. I shouldn't have the cup of coffee. Then there's a connection, a layer of connection there where it seems pertinent and relevant to you because there is like this potential interaction with coffee or not. But that doesn't actually exist any more so than the kangaroos on Jupiter. It is still an idea that where you are sitting right now has the potential for an interaction with coffee or not. Do you know what I'm saying?
Let me see if I can say this back to you. Um, what if I'm understanding you correctly? What you're saying is that the thought to have coffee doesn't have the reality and the substance that I believe it does.
Yes. In
Okay.
much fewer words. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'm efficient if nothing else.
You really are. We because an idea is in the mind, we, like you said before, that we assume it to be true, but we also assume that there is some sort of connection to an actual world outside of us that we can
Ooh,
interact with.
boy, that's a distinction that I hadn't really been clear on before. That we assume something's true that we think it, but that's where I tend to stop.
Yeah,
I don't really give any thought to the fact that there's the assumption that it is actually connecting to out here.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. There is a belief that
Huh.
this substance of coffee that could be interacted with, that there is this
Hmm.
real, you know, tangible world that I can now interact with because of this thought. That this thought is like the bridge to either making something happen or to bringing something else into my experience.
Right.
And what we basically are doing is looking at the thought and seeing that it is just an insubstantial sound. Maybe it gets created into meaning, but that meaning is no more relevant to this moment than kangaroos on Jupiter.
And if all it was the thought, it probably wouldn't be an issue for anybody who, um, we probably have somebody watching this at some point in time who um, goes out to, say, a club and stays out too late or something, and they
Yep.
really wish they wouldn't do it because they have to get up in the morning and it's killing them.
Yeah.
Um, and the it's not enough to just see that the thought is empty. Something it has to be recognized that there's this belief that it connects to out there,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that if you ask me right now, okay, explain to me how to dissolve or dismantle the belief that something you're thinking about, however real it seems, because you can go and open up the cabinet and point to a bag of ground coffee.
Yep.
Explain to me how that belief in its substance and reality is generated. And I would just kind of look at you blankly, and like on the cartoons, blink, 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 blink. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So we investigate our experience that makes it seem like that's here. Like sitting in the room right now, you don't have coffee in front of you or around you, right?
No, no.
The idea of coffee is an abstract image right now in the mind. It, it,
Hmm.
it's there's an assumption that something called coffee even exists in the world, right?
Yeah,
Going back to what we talked about earlier, you have to have this belief right now that coffee exists and isn't something that you have just fabricated in this moment in the mind.
right.
Just like where you were, the house that you lived in. There's an assumption that because it pops into mind, I can see a picture of it, I can have this flavor memory in the mouth, I know the word, clearly it points to something real. So we can break that down first of all and just see that as it is in your current direct experience, coffee is an illusion. We don't know what coffee even is. There's no such one thing as coffee anyway. Is it a bean? Is it a liquid? Is every coffee the same? Every cup of coffee. We don't have to go down that road right now, but seeing that like in your actual experience in the moment, it's not is not here. Now, if you do get up and walk into the kitchen and you open the cabinet door and there's a bag of coffee there, then how is this thought actually relating to whether or not your hand reaches out, gets the coffee, makes a pot of it or not? Is this thought actually directing that behavior?
Ooh, is that thought actually directing behavior? Well, it seems kind of tenuous, but the sticking point for me is the fact that there's a thought and then there's a subsequent action.
Hmm. Sometimes. Oftentimes,
Sometimes,
what we
okay, fair
actually
enough.
have is that the action happens and then the thought comes in later to explain why the action happened. It's like a post hoc rationalization that happens. We tend to do that a lot.
Ah, okay.
Um, so, you find yourself getting a cup of coffee, and then there's like the explanation of, oh, well, yeah, I'm feeling tired right now. Like, oh, okay, here I am, scoop, 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 as you're making the coffee. There can be that kind of like there were those split brain patient tests that they had done, with people who had had the corpus callosum severed, and then they would like feed into one side of the brain the command to like get up out of your chair and go across the room for whatever reason. And I think they don't give them a reason. I think they just give the command to like get up across the room and do it. But that's it's feeding it to the right side of the brain. So the person gets up and they do the thing, but they don't know why they're doing it. Then they ask them, well, why did you get up to cross the room? And the left side of the brain, which is the verbal side, doesn't know. It didn't have the command fed into it. That was only fed to the right side. So the left side says, I was thirsty. I got up to get a soda. It creates the reason afterwards because it didn't have all the information. So it looks around, figures out the best possible explanation, and then presents it. And it
Well,
does this sort of thing all the time.
well, what about okay, for instance, common occurrences. I can be somewhere in the house or, well, even out of the house, and I may have to go get something off the porch in a moment.
Sure.
Um, Godfrey, he's going to get really upset.
Uh,
He
yeah.
doesn't like anyone he doesn't know coming up and getting near the house.
Well,
But just like we'll take a hypothetical situation, which is something that's a fairly common occurrence here. I'm sitting here.
yeah,
There's a thought. I'm feeling kind of tired. I'll go get some coffee, and then I get up, go to the kitchen, pull it out of the cabinet, and begin the process.
yeah,
So in that case, it appears. Okay, I'm putting that word there.
yep,
Appears as the appearance of, not necessarily assumed to be true.
yep,
Appears that the idea and the thought preceded the activity.
yeah.
So
Correlation is not causation, they say.
yes,
Yeah,
I've been hearing that a lot lately.
yeah. A lot of truth to that. So, but there have been times that you've had that thought where you haven't gone and gotten coffee though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the thought itself does not have any power to do something. The thought at best might be a contributing factor to a whole complicated web of conditions that might lead to either getting the coffee or not.
The thought does not necessarily lead to the action.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, you demonstrated that well. That there are times those thoughts happen and it doesn't occur. Here's the way I understand this, based on all of the, and it's still an ongoing thing of making a point to so many times a day inquire into the apparent decision making process.
Hmm.
And after having done that, however many times now, it seems like here's my model for what's going on there is that there are processes that are below the threshold of awareness and they're
Yep.
not initiated by the thing that we think goes around initiating things like
Yep.
getting the keys and going out the door to get in the car or going to bed at night when it's time to go to bed. It's it's something else. It's something that we have very little. I'm saying all of this kind of with a big caveat over the whole thing. We have very little control over. Uh,
Yeah.
it's something that we don't know what's going on until we see the result of it. Like, okay, now hand comes out to open up the door. Um, so there are processes that we don't see, we can't feel, we don't have any awareness of them until the actual thing it's intending to do occurs. And so that it seems like that must be what's going on there because sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And there are times it can happen without a thought too.
Hmm.
There are times where, all of a sudden you realize, well, I'm walking into the kitchen to get coffee.
Yeah.
I don't remember actually thinking anything about it. It's just happening. That seems to be what's at work. There's this assumption. I mean, based on what you said to me, that's what I'm understanding is there's this assumption about the involvement of thought with an action, and that's not actually the case. There's something else going on that we
Exactly.
really can only say so much about.
Exactly. It's the idea that one thought causes one action is a very, very limited view of the world and the reality. It is such a complicated web. I mean, your coffee in itself, right? Like literally, that coffee wouldn't even be an option if it hadn't been picked by somebody in some other country and, all the processing and it was purchased and brought, we can go through that whole chain of events.
Right,
But also, if your conditioning was such that you didn't like the taste of coffee, that you had no particular history with coffee, that it's only an option because everything has led together to where there is a sort of a proclivity towards coffee to begin with. So, that is the drink of choice right now. Also because there is tiredness in the body. And we know that this particular substance that I enjoy the taste of has a effect in it that enlivens the body for a short period of time.
right.
All of these things are going on, plus, I mean, nearly infinite number of other effects or causes that are part of this experience. Then there happens to be a thought that also says, I should have some coffee right now. I'm tired. I should have coffee. That is like the last little bit of, like I was trying to think of a suitable metaphor for that because it's like the yeah, there's got to be a good one someplace.
Well,
But
it's the, to put it loosely, the final culmination of a process that could have begun much earlier in time. Like,
anyway,
you could wind up having tamales for dinner that night, and the thing that led to tamales at dinner that evening could have started when the alarm goes off, you wake up, and you think about the Mexican restaurant you used to like to go to, and you haven't been there in a
yeah,
long time. You remember how good the tamales were, and then you forget about it completely,
yeah,
completely out of
completely.
mind. It's completely gone, and then dinner rolls around, and that's been processing in
Yeah.
the head all day, and you're like, wow, man, tamales would be really good, and you don't even remember the thought that you had that morning.
Completely, completely. Yeah, or you saw something on a TV where it was mentioned
Yeah.
a day or a week ago or something. Yeah, absolutely. So, so it's really being aware of like, what is the power of one thought now? How
Seems pretty
potent?
absurd, really.
Completely, completely it is. But and it's seeing that over and over again that
So it takes
one
time.
thought. It does. Yeah, of course. It's not just a one and done thing, but it's seeing
So
different contexts, like hearing the voice in the head, seeing the image that shows up with it, feeling the sensations in the body, and then recognizing like, what is this actually doing? That sensation in the body, it's not creating meaning. It's not making you actually get up and do something, right? Even if the feeling feels potent because this co-arises with an image or a sound in the head, it's not actually forcing you to get up and get a cup of coffee or to meditate or do anything else for that matter. The sound in your head, that voice saying I should have a cup of coffee, does not make you have a cup of coffee. I mean, you can say right now I should jump out of a window, but hopefully you're not actually going to do it, right? The
right.
words themselves don't necessarily carry any weight to them. They don't make something happen that either wasn't going to happen to begin with, or that, like, maybe it's like one little grain of sand on the scale that is, pounds and pounds of sand that was already there.
Right.
Um, we give way too much credit to that one particular sound in the mind,
I see.
one particular image. And so the more we can become aware of like this sensation is just sensation. This sound is just sound. This image, again, like we did before, where I'm sure that I was raised and grew up in this house. Well, let's substitute in a different house. Can you still have the same conviction? Oh yeah, I guess I can. Okay. So how real is that thought? Like that sensation was still there when you were picturing the Golden Girls house or some other house, right? The sensation that supposedly told you that this first house was really my house that I grew up in. We can play just like we were talking before about the Robert Anton Wilson thing about having that like, can I completely buy into Rush Limbaugh or can I completely buy into somebody else? It's putting yourself in that position where you realize that we are very convincible about
Yes.
new information that might be completely wrong if we had some sort of objective view on it, but we don't. So we're always coming back to that. It feels right to me now. And what does that mean for it to feel true or feel right? And then we break that down. Oh, there's some sensation somewhere in this central channel of the body. Oh, there's an image in the mind. Well, can we swap that image? Can we feel just as confident about the opposite thing or some other thing? Oh, yeah, I guess we can. All right. Well, what does that tell you about the truth of your experience?
Well, that was one thing that if you were walking me through that when we were doing that earlier, I somehow missed. So as part of that, practice, um, is, is it is part of that practice to also take that feeling of this is the house I grew up in and map it onto another different house to try
Yeah.
to make that believable, make it true. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Effectively, see if you can. That was when I said, "Can you bring up another image?" And the sensation still stays there. The sensation that seems to be the one telling you this is true, right? We see that that remains even regardless of which image we place in the place of our original house, that sensation is there. If that sensation was actually the proof that that was a true thing, a true statement that that house was the house I grew up in, then that sensation should completely go away when you put in another image. You shouldn't be able to draw that same parallel, but the sensation is still there because it's just sensation in the body. It doesn't
Well,
actually relate to the truth of it.
the sensation was still there, but I was, and I'll go ahead and say this partly for the sake of amusement, but also for the sake of
Yeah,
clarity. The
yeah,
house that I was imagining in lieu of the house I grew up in was the house from the 1960s Addams Family show.
nice. Yeah,
So, um, but when picturing that house, I wasn't able to get that feeling, and I'm sure I could have if I worked with
yeah,
it.
yeah.
When we were doing that earlier, I was not able to get that feeling to fully map to that image and go, oh yeah, that's the house I grew up in, make that completely believable.
Yeah.
So is that something that it sounds like that needs to be included when doing this?
You don't have to do that, but I think it's another really interesting technique to see if you can do that because
Well, it
it's
seems like
one
it'd
more
be.
way of undermining the belief in.
I was going to say it seems like that would be another effective way of kind of drilling that in and really undermining. I think that's the word you just used too.
It is. Yeah.
Undermining that that idea, that
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah,
Okay.
completely it is.
All right. All right. Well, I'll fool around with that then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really
Wow.
interesting. And see if you can't, if there is a barrier there that says, no, 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 this is the house I grew up in. I did not grow up in the Addams Family house. See what is making that unable to map on. Where is that barrier coming in? Is it a physical sensation that is separate? Is there a contrary line of thinking? Is there something else going on that is making that seem untrue, impossible? And then the other one that seems, yeah, yeah, that's it. That's
Wow, that's surprisingly not hard to do. I
it.
really thought that was going to take some effort and pull up the feeling and then bring in the image. And it wasn't a totally absolutely convincing thing in the sense of
Yeah.
like um, a car is coming at you on the highway and it's about to collide and you're going to have a head-on collision. It didn't have that degree of reality and conviction, but it was easy to get a sense of, yeah, I grew up in that house with Gomez and Morticia.
Uh-huh. Completely.
That was wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to work with that some more. That's really interesting.
It is. I had a similar thing the other day. I was trying to think of Gordon Ramsay's name because
Mhm.
there's a video that I was trying to look up and I could not think of his name. And I'm just like sitting here going, I know it starts with a G or there's like an R, and I could kind of like get those, could not come. Then it was just nowhere near. So then like the mind popped out some completely random name. I forget what it was now. It was like Gord or Gary, something. And I'm like, all right, that's his name now. And I was like, can I convince, like, what would it feel like if that's like the name? And you can get that certainty, like, yeah, that's his name. The funny thing was, when I started looking it up and finally found what it was, I was like, Gordon Ramsay, that can't be right. Like, that's not the right name. Like, that feels really wrong. And so it is a very malleable sense.
Well, I've experienced that before when I was in my teens, late teens, and when I was uh, um, that was a period of regular psychedelics, and so because of that thing, and of course I was also reading Robert Anton Wilson. What a great combination! So things were pretty malleable,
Yeah.
and it hit me one day that what happened was I forget what day of the week it was, but I realized it was a day of the week, and it felt like Saturday.
Uh,
And I'm like, what?
yeah.
Hold on a minute. So the day of the week is just this kind of this feeling sense.
It's
Uh,
so
that's
interesting.
interesting. So okay, if it feels like Saturday, and so over the years, from time to time, I would play with that. I would try to make Saturday feel like Monday because each day of the week had a kind of a weird, distinct vibe
Yeah.
about it. And I got so that I could do that really easily and make Wednesday feel like Sunday or Friday, Monday feel like Friday or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, I dissolved the days of the week and time and months and all that. I just
Yeah.
that all got undermined years ago. Um, but obviously there's still more work that can be done with it because, I'm bedeviled by thoughts that lead to drinking coffee. So, um,
And it's really just looking at the components of the thought. Don't feel like if you have a sound, the words in your head that say I should get a cup of coffee now,
mhm.
just note if there's a feeling and an image attached, and never take that to be one whole bundle of a thought, right? Always break it down into its components. So the physical components, the auditory components, and the visual components. Because a
Okay.
thought isn't just one thing. I mean, it might be like just showing up in the sound field. Like again, if it was like um, little bunnies frolicking in the field, there might just be sound. You might then, I think that's a harder one because actually there's probably an image component that shows up with that. But like
Right.
if it's just like, I don't know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. There's like it's just sound unless there's some sort of visual component that shows up and all of a sudden you see a triangle or something like that. But like
Okay.
um take take each one of those at sort of at face value for what it is. Like break it apart so that it's just sound and it's just image and it's just sensation. And when I'm talking about like the thinness of those, explore each one of those to see what kind of density or solidity do any of those have. Images have no inherent solidity or density. They don't take up space. They don't appear anywhere,
Yeah,
right?
they're like smoke. They're like clouds of smoke.
Exactly. And it's the same with sound. Even the biggest, deepest, bassiest, loudest sound is just vibration of air molecules outside, and inside it has just as little substance as the images. It's all appearing in that same vacant non-space. Sensation is the closest thing to something that feels like it might be more dense. But then as soon as you start to put your attention on that, what was dense just becomes that cloud of, energetic particles or however you experience it. So, like, there is nothing in your experience that has any inherent solidity when you actually start to just investigate it on its own. And that's really what I'm pointing to when I say that all of those thoughts they have no connection on their own to anything outside of their own little sphere of experience. You're if you imagine bunnies frolicking a field, they don't actually appear in the world around you. They
Right.
don't they don't do anything. They don't attack you. They don't, there's no connection. And just saying to yourself that I am going to have a cup of coffee or I'm going to jump out of a window doesn't actually make either of those things happen. It's
Right.
just sound, unless all of these other conditions happen to be met, in which case one might be more likely to happen than the other.
Well, and it's that sensation in the body. Um, and it's funny because that has been the constant theme from the very first sessions up to today. I mean, going all the way back to when it was, I mean, that was something that came up very quickly and comes up consistently, and it applies in all these different situations. But the thought in the head, the sight, the sound, any tactile information, like not the sensation of the body, but say, like feeling, something in your hands. All of that seems to be kind of secondary to that. That's what you call the primary sensation,
Mhm.
which, the primary sensation, regardless of context, seems to be the salesman. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, it really is. That's a good way of putting it.
I mean, that's the one who really convinces. It's like this is really true. You know,
Love that.
um, okay. So how do we? If you were going to try to just kind of sum that up simply for the
Hmm.
sake of making it easy to grab in the moment, How would you put that?
Yeah. Every time you feel identified with a thought comes up. It seems something that's about me that I should be following. It feels like, again, like if it's like, it's my better self saying, no, no, I shouldn't have the coffee. Feel like drop into the body right now. Feel what is here physically. Notice the actuality of the voice that is saying, no, no, I shouldn't have the coffee. Notice any images that show up and see if any of this has any sort of substance to it outside of this weird little virtual world in which they're appearing. Can you simply just notice these sensations, the sounds, the sights, and just let them be and pass? Can
Hmm.
you see that they don't actually make something happen or relate to anything else outside of themselves? That these are just sounds, sights, and sensations. And then be aware of what happens next now. Do you actually get up and get a cup of coffee? Do you do something completely unrelated? You can observe um, the sort of impulse to do something, that feeling that like the body is being driven to do it. And this brings us back to the investigations into agency. So you can really see like, are you the one actually choosing to move the muscles and get up and move into the kitchen to get the cup of coffee? At what point does it feel like there is something here which is making a choice? It's like, who is it who is telling you to that you shouldn't get a cup of coffee or that you should? Who is convincing whom? Right? Like there's an idea that there's like one you in there who is saying, I feel like I want a cup of coffee. Another you who is saying, no, no, you shouldn't have it. And then one who is like going to take one of these two under consideration and then act out one or the other. I'm either going to get the coffee or not based on my consideration of these two opposing viewpoints. So, can you feel and find anybody in there who is arguing both of these positions and then being the final arbiter and picking one and going with it?
Wow. Makes me think of that Walt Whitman line that people love to quote, I'm vast, I contain multitudes.
Completely. We are, and we do.
um, and no one's paying any rent.
No, no, that's true.
Um, okay, I'm gonna have to go back and um, boy, I've got my work cut out for me because this has been a long conversation and there's a lot of
Yeah.
this I need to jot down.
Okay. Yeah.
But
There's a lot
I'm
there.
definitely going to need to go back and make some notes on this and condense it down. I've done this before. You'll have something that you suggest, and it'll be a little bit involved, and I'll have to just go through and listen to it a couple of times, and then write it down, and then figure out what's the most logical way that will make sense to the brain to condense that further and get
Yeah.
it down to like a sentence or less. So all I have to do is just there's just this couple of words and I know, okay,
Yeah.
and this is what that represents, and you do this.
Yeah. You're
So,
really good with the condensation. I am, or with the condensing. I know, like, even when we're in talks and I'll say
huh?
something for like 10 minutes and you're like, so basically you're saying boop in a sentence. It's like, yes, that's it. So well
I
done.
have no idea where that comes from.
Yeah, really, really good. Really good at consolidating and simplifying. So that's appreciated.
Okay, well, that's
So,
that's 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 interesting quality to have. I wonder where that comes from. That's really interesting. I, I don't know that this is entirely it, but I think part of it comes from when Tuesday was younger. I have a tendency to go on. I really do. My
yeah.
mom, I took after my mom in that she is just one of those interminable blue streaks.
Uh-huh.
And and I still do. I mean,
Yeah.
Susanna sometimes gets kind of impatient because of the fact that, I'll just go on.
Yeah,
Like,
me
does he
too.
have an off switch? Um, but with Tuesday, she's this little kid, and
Yeah.
I had to learn to get good at saying what needed to be said in as few words as possible because I
Yeah.
didn't know how long I had her attention for.
Completely. Completely. It's a
So
good skill to have.
yeah.
Um,
So I'll be interested to see what kind of comments we get on this
yeah, me too.
because I think that this particular conversation may rub some people the wrong way, may make some people a little bit uncomfortable, which
Yeah.
I'm sorry if it does, but I mean, I don't, I just can't get behind the idea of either trying to sugarcoat it or um, uh, not be fully forthcoming about um, the things that relate to the true nature of what we're doing here.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, I think anybody who's stuck with it this far probably won't be too bothered because, if you can be okay with the idea of there's no one here,
Yeah.
you're okay with the idea that there's just not any kind of self involved, the rest of the stuff shouldn't be too troubling, I would hope.
Hopefully, yeah. There are some people though, it really gives them that, the little problematic, painful self isn't here, but there's a much bigger self.
Uh,
Everything is okay, and that's the one that I can rely on. And it also keeps us from, if we have that fear of death, that fear of, annihilation of some sort, which even if there's like, okay, so there's no self here, but there's something that feels like it's here and it is going to die at some point. Well, now if I have some bigger thing that I can affiliate myself with that's never going to die, consciousness is eternal, then I'm that now I don't have to worry. And so it's a really good way of not feeling that feeling of fear of death or sort of impending mortality. And I get that for people. Like, there's no criticism of that. It's the problem is that it's only useful up until the point that that belief falls away. And
right.
if it falters a bit, if you suddenly no longer have that to rely on, then you're really left in the desert. So, um,
Yeah. Well, I cannot remember which sutta it is, and I cannot quote it, but I remember there is a sutta somewhere where the Buddha was said to have said that, and I wish I could remember how it was phrased because I'm going to butcher it, but something about how when a person has seen through the illusion of self completely and that there is not any kind of self at all, of any kind remaining, not a variation on a self in here or a larger self that we're a part of, when all of that has been seen through, the king of death cannot find you.
yeah,
And
that's
that's
right.
far more comforting, I think.
Absolutely. Me too. But, it takes stages for some people. It
Oh, that's
depends on
fine.
what, yeah, exactly. It depends on what that has been doing for them, and yeah, it's a case by case basis. And that's why we're just so adamant that like, as long as it's working for you and if you feel really comfortable with it, there's no need to rock that boat potentially. It's okay,
Yeah,
as long as you need it. And ultimately we don't know, I mean, there's always that openness that maybe consciousness is eternal and maybe there really is this, you know, whatever we're experiencing that we can't name as us, maybe it really is this ever-present eternal phenomena that we just can't determine
yeah.
yet.
And even though there's this deep intuitive sense that what has been seen up to this point, which means that there truly is no one here, that it's all just things like that sense, that that funny physical sense, that density or thoughts or mental pictures, whatever, or an aggregate of those things, that maybe there is such a thing as the soul, and it's just not something that a human being can perceive with their nervous system.
Mhm.
And I think about all these kids who remember past lives, and they can give a
I
long list of really specific details that there's no
yeah,
way that they should have that.
I know. They
Uh,
are very compelling stories.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, even though, like I said, I have that very deep intuitive sense about what has been seen so far and the fact that there's not an anyone here, those things often come to mind. It's, well, what if?
Yep.
You
We
know,
don't know. And
so
that's
we
why we
know.
ultimately just land on the not knowing because we really, at this point, can't explain everything. And we probably never will be able to. All
Well,
right. This has been such a pleasure. Sorry I have to run.
no, I understand. It's been great. I couldn't ask for any more.
Thank you so much. All
All
right.
right, I'll talk to you
Talk
next
to you
time.
soon. Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.